Imagine some 65 years ago, 56% of the land which you once called home was given to a people who needed it more than you. Over the next year, through systematic expulsion, ethnic cleansing, war, and greater military might, they would go on to take 78% of this land. In the next 40 years, through checkpoints, occupation, war, and destruction, they would go on to take on 100% of the land which you once called home, forcing you into settlements and refugee camps all over the world. Worst of all, somewhere along the lines, you became the bad guy. I ask you a simple question. If this was you, how hard would you be willing to fight to reclaim your land? And how far would you be willing to go to grab your home, your country, and the future of your children from the jaws of despair?
This is for Palestine, Ramallah, West Bank, Gaza. This is for the child that is searching for an answer. Wish I could take your tears and replace them with laughter. Long live Palestine, long live Gaza. Palestine, Ramallah, West Bank, Gaza. This is for the child that is searching for an answer. Wish I could take your tears and replace them with laughter. Long live Palestine. While we listen to tunes made by ignorant fools, Israel blocked the UN from delivering food. They bring in the troops and you won't even glimpse of the news. They make money off the products that we're quick to consume. And it's not simply a question of differing views. Forget emotions, this is facts.
We want peace. We want peace. We want peace for the Palestinians, we want peace for the Israelis.
They want peace as a tactic to get rid of the Palestinian problem. That's their aim on peace.
Israel is saying that they want peace, but unless they're going to give the Palestinians their land back and stop the sort of murder and genocide that's going on over there, then I don't see how there will be.
By peace, basically, they mean to accept whatever they want. That's what they mean really by peace.
You're not sure. Sorry? Where's your hand?
Free Palestine! 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 Free Palestine!
They're ignoring the facts. They were uprooted from the land, and till this day, still now, they're being uprooted and being dispossessed. And they want peace on those terms. They want people to make peace on those terms of occupying another and subjugating them, and then they want peace.
Zionists have any comprehension of what peace means.
With checkpoints and settlements, and they want peace. This doesn't go that way.
How can you stand with people who want to kill Jewish people?
Why they want to kill? That's my question. Why they want to kill people? We are not stupid, we're not dogs. Are you saying that use the head of it?
So let me just stop you there. They're not rabbis.
There's a reason why they hate them.
They're Jewish people, but they're not rabbis.
Who made the boycott against Hitler? The Zionists. They make a boycott in 33. Yes. Yeah, it wasn't Zionist. No. It wasn't Zionist. It was terrorist Zionist. No, that.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
What about Hamas suicide bombers? How many Gazans were bombed?
The Jewish people decided they wanted to take Israel as their land. The British then said, fine, they can come in.
This isn't a Muslim issue, it's not a Jewish issue. Zionism has got nothing to do with Judaism.
The land actually belonged to, as far as I'm aware, if you're saying I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, it belonged to the British, and the British gave it over.
And now I'm just getting emotional.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
From mainstream music to the streets, the Palestinian cause commands great emotion and debate all over the world, with both sides arguing that they're right and both sides chanting for peace. It's amazing that after 65 years, peace is the one thing that seems to have eluded the Middle East in that particular region. Over the next 20 minutes, although we could never do the entire subject justice, we intend to give you a brief history of Palestine and at the same time help you answer the question, is peace a real possibility or just another great tactic of war?
The Middle East is a place of hospitality. It really is. Far more hospitable than Africa or North America. Really, this is a place where people know how to respect guests, how to accept people who are different. The history of Jews in Islam is so different from Jews in Christianity. also because of Islam, but also because of the Middle East. It stands to reason the Jews were treated much better in the Arab world than they were treated in Europe.
In fact, you don't have to look too far back into time to find proof of this. Historically, when the Jews were being persecuted all over Europe, it was the Arab nations that provided them with protection and security and allowed them to thrive as a people. As following World War I, the British got the mandate for Palestine and made a commitment to the Arabs to allow them self-determination and self-governance. But that was a promise they were not going to keep. For in 1917, Britain signed the Balfour Declaration, which highlighted Britain's sympathy for the Zionist Jews and supported their ambitions to create a Jewish state in the land of Palestine.
Zionism was a 19th century ideology which emerged saying that the only way in which Jews could be safe in the world was if they had their own state, and that the best place for the state was in the biblical homeland of Eretz Yisrael.
One can say that to begin with, Zionism, which is the ideological movement that created the State of Israel, begins with two noble ideas. One is safety, and the other is new kind of identity. The problem is that these people were looking for a place in which to implement these two ideas of having a safer place for Jews and a place where Jews could create a state of their own or fulfill their right for self-determination.
Not all Jews were Zionist. In fact, before the establishment of the State of Israel, Zionism was most definitely a minority view among Jews, and most religious Jews were very opposed to the formation of the State of Israel and did not support Zionism, which they saw as a political movement, not connected with the religious understanding that the return to the yearning for Jerusalem was real, but it was a spiritual yearning, a return at the end of time. It was something that would be accomplished when the Messiah returned. It was part of a kind of religious culture. It wasn't something to be brought about by political intervention. And most Jews, as I say, were opposed to the Zionist movement before 1948.
But even the Orthodox Jews would change their opinions with the rise of a new power in Europe, Nazi Germany.
The Holocaust, what happened in World War II, was disastrous, horrific. Was no fault at all of the Palestinians, was no fault at all of the Arab world. I mean, it was the mess that Europe created.
Israel was created on the back of the Holocaust. The Germans killed the Jews, and as a result, the sympathy that was created from that was argued by the Zionists that we need our own homeland. Look what's happened to us. And so they were given Palestine.
I think one of the problems in understanding this conflict is that there are so many myths about it. Israel, for decades, was the darling of the Western world and also of the left, because it had appeared to be a state that liberated Jews who'd been appallingly oppressed and massacred in Europe. And after 1948, there was a tremendous emotional sympathy for the Jews who'd gone there. But it was sold on the basis of many lies and distortions. In particular, the Zionist myth that Palestine was a land without people for a people without land was simply untrue.
In 1947, following an escalation of violence, Britain handed the mandate for Palestine over to the UN, who in 1948 were going to make the Zionist dream a reality.
ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
But as the Zionists celebrated their newfound independence, the existing Arab inhabitants had to make space for the new occupiers. By 1948, 400,000 Palestinians had already been made refugees. 56% of the land, of which 92% was owned by Palestinians, was handed over to Israel. In late 1948, 76,000 Arab troops went up against a more powerful 90,000 Israeli troops, and were very quickly defeated, resulting in 78% of the land now being occupied by Israel. But it wasn't a matter of a simple occupation. It was an occupation through force, it was an occupation through illegal settlements, and it was an occupation which came with a reign of terror and tyranny for all those who remained. One could argue that in 1948 the Zionist movement had achieved its core objective of a land, but the violence and occupation continued. With treatment like this, it's no wonder that the Palestinian people decided to fight back. They tried to do it democratically, but when Hamas came into power, they were punished by the Israeli government with increased sanctions and bloodshed as a punishment. After all, Hamas had fired rockets into Israel. I mean, how dare they fight back?
Events in the region are opening people's eye to a simple truth. The problems of the region are not rooted in Israel.
You have to accept that you are part of the Arab world, you are a minority in the Arab world, you are part of the Muslim world, you are a minority in the Muslim world, and you have to insist on the right to exist, on the right for dignity, for respect, for living good life. And if these rights are granted, you should be able to continue to live in the Middle East. But the rights that you insist of are the right to rule, to occupy, to colonize, to torture, and by that you are signing your own end.
One could ask the question, where is the UN? After all, with such humanitarian crisis and ethnic cleansing and such increased violence, you'd think that UN would have done something by now. After all, wasn't it the UN who initially caused this in the first place?
You're asking me why, with Israel in breach of so many United Nations resolutions, something hasn't yet been done about it. Well, in one sense, that's everybody's question. It's in part because the United Nations doesn't have the power that many of us would like it to have. It is still clearly very dominated by the big powers, most particularly by the United States. And it's that the interests the United States perceives itself to have in the Middle East require an Israel that is strong and relatively uncurbed.
Unfortunately, I think the UN has very little power. We saw, like, when during Operation Cast Lead, the UN warehouse, UN schools were bombed. I mean, Israel again said that they didn't know where the school was, which is obviously complete lies, because that's the first thing they knew, where the school for the UN is, where the warehouse is. So when this happened, Ban Ki-moon, so the Secretary General, only words were sort of, I'm shocked, I'm upset. What's important, even at the UN Security Council, is the US voice. So anything related to Israel, the US will veto it. It's because they are the same, they are the same entity for me. So recently, when you had the UN resolution, just saying there's no doubt under international law that the settlements are illegal. So the resolution was saying, we condemn Israeli settlements as illegal and they should be dismantled for peace or something. 14 out of 15 signed the resolutions. And the US vetoed it, which was pretty much the last straw, saying, look, that's it.
If the power in the United Nations would move from the Security Council to the General Assembly, Israel would have a serious problem of legitimization, even now, even without doing even worse things that he's already done.
The disappointment about what Israel has become is that it doesn't encompass those lessons from the past. It's chosen a way of viewing the world constantly about threat, constantly about a memory of the Holocaust, of genocide, of these kinds of things, without somehow, at least externally demonstrating that same concern applying to others, without taking into consideration how other people feel in the camps, those that have been driven out of their homes, etc. And that's problematic. That's the aspect, I think, which really, for someone like me, makes it much more difficult to really fully accept an Israeli line about the notion of threat, the notion of what's legitimate and what's not legitimate, because it's not the equal application of memory over those past 60 years.
What makes the entire affair even worse for Muslims all over the world is the US involvement in terms of the support of Israel, with $80 billion of funding pledged to the Israeli state and protection and veto protection, it begs the question, just what does the US have to gain? And in fact, how long has the US been involved all along?
When the Israelis invaded Egypt together with Britain and France, the Americans objected to it. And in fact, it was the United States that forced Israel to withdraw from Egypt. And the Americans were supporting the refugees until. It is with the death of President Kennedy and after the Six-Day War that the whole American attitude changes. And then comes in not only the issue of the Holocaust. In the case of the Americans, there are different reasons for the support. One is Christian Zionism, which becomes a very powerful force in America. Second is the Cold War with the Soviet Union. American strategists believe that Israel is a great asset in that war. And thirdly, the Israelis build, but it only begins in '67, they build a very strong Jewish lobby.
America will never go against Israel, and there's a number of reasons for that. Lobbies like AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, are powerful within America. That Jewish Zionist lobby within America is unparalleled. No other lobby is as powerful. Secondly, the Christian Zionists within America, which number approximately 100 million, are heavily political. They are not a margin, fringe, block vote. They are massive, they are in the system, and they are embedded within that system.
No vote at the United Nations will ever create an independent Palestinian state, and the United States will stand up against efforts to single Israel out at the United Nations or in any international forum. Israel's legitimacy is not a matter for debate. That is my commitment. That is my pledge to all of you.
Says the same US president who vowed to create an independent Palestinian state not so long ago.
Israel and the US are the same entity. And that's why it's always very important to emphasize that Israeli crimes are also US crimes. Israeli crimes are committed with US weapons, with US armored vehicles, with US warplanes. So it's important never to dissociate the two. And that's why the whole rift between Obama and Netanyahu is all fake. It's to entertain the people.
We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines, with mutually agreed swaps, so that secure and recognized borders are established for both states.
Tomorrow in Congress, I'll describe what a peace between a Palestinian state and the Jewish state could look like. But I want to assure you of one thing. It must leave Israel with security, and therefore Israel cannot return to the indefensible 1967 lines.
Netanyahu is a Zionist and obviously never accept the 1967 borders because the Zionist vision is a Palestinian state on, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River.
With such great ambition and an economy so reliant on war, is peace even a real possibility in the Middle East?
Peace is always a possibility when people decide that the price of war or instability is too high a price to pay. Unless the United States puts pressure on Israel to make peace, I think it's very unlikely to happen.
The only way to peace is through direct negotiations, not through decisions by international fora. And Israel is ready today to immediately commence peace talks with the Palestinians.
Let me tell you something. There will never be peace in the Middle East. Never. Why would Israel, a military state that could defeat, according to many of the defense journals, all of the Middle Eastern countries combined 10 times over because of the weaponry that America has provided it? Why would they ever give up any land without being forced to? The only country that could force it to is America. And let's face it, America is never going to do anything against what the Israel lobby wants them to do. So there'll never be peace in the Middle East because power never takes a step back unless it's against more power.
Israel, by coming into the Middle East, by refusing or being unwilling to make the concessions necessary for peace when it could have done so, has contributed in no small measure to the ongoing nature of the project. And many people would claim it has done this because it does not want peace. It does not want anything short of an Israeli state which includes the whole of the West Bank. And one has to say that its continued occupation, building of settlements and so on since 1967 would suggest that a lot of its talk about a two-state solution is not talk that it itself takes seriously.
Now, anyone who ever criticises Zionism or Israel stands the risk of being called an anti-Semite, or stands the risk of being told that it's a one-sided argument. But instead of justifying it for myself, I'll allow Professor Ilan Pape to clarify.
I think it's wrong to say that a balanced view is a Zionist view versus the Palestinian view. No, I don't think there is a parity between a colonizer, an occupier, and an ethnic cleanser, and the victim. The victim's narrative is the correct one. The victimizer's narrative is the wrong one.
It seems the people most responsible for bringing peace to the region are the people who seem to be stopping it the most. But there is hope, and the recent hope comes in the form of an Arab revolution, which is bringing a new wave of democracy and change, never seen before.
This is the 16th day of these massive countrywide, nationwide demonstrations and protests that in the last couple of days again stepping away violent. That is the demand for Hosni Mubarak security forces.
One of the interesting things over the past 6 months has been seeing how the Arab Spring has really shown a lot of those arguments about Israel as the only beacon of a secular democracy, which wasn't true anyway. I mean, Israel's not a particularly secular state. It's become increasingly less and less secular over time. But it's forced, in some ways, the West to confront a lot of the convenient falsehoods.
People, public opinion in general, knew what was happening in Palestine, knew the facts, not the propaganda and the lies. I think the conflict, due to popular pressure, could have been solved a long, long time ago.
I think I would like to end by quoting Edward Said. I think late Edward Said has articulated the best. It is questionable, and it will be debatable forever, whether Zionism was good or bad for the Jews. This is an open question. I don't think you have a clear issue. And I can say it for myself. The people of my family who survived the German Holocaust were those who found refuge in Palestine. So for me, it's complex. Had they not been allowed into Palestine, they would have been exterminated by the Nazis. But as far as the Palestinians are concerned, Edward Said says, it's bad news from beginning to end. Now, if it continues to be bad news for the Palestinians, it would be eventually also bad news for the Jews.